Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining today's webinar. Really excited to have you with us today. We've got a lot of great content lined up. We're going to be speaking with some folks from the Conestoga Valley School District and talking about how they have deployed Cisco Meraki equipment through their K-12 network. Chris and Brian, are y'all on the line?
Yes, we are. Yep, we're here.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let me go ahead and get this presentation up. So here's the agenda for today. What we're going to do is we're going to have a brief introduction to Meraki and Cisco Cloud Networking for those of you who may not be as familiar with it. Then we'll talk a little bit about why you might want to consider cloud networking as an option, and we'll launch pretty quickly into a case study. So we're going to talk to these folks from Conestoga Valley School District. They've graciously allowed us to demo their own live production network for the purposes of this webinar. And what we'll do then is wrap up afterwards with some Q&A and a little bit of an overview of our product line. So my name is Emily. I'm a product marketing manager here at Cisco. And with me today is my colleague Jackie. So she's online and on the call. If you have any questions during this webinar, we encourage you to ask them in the Q&A box on your screen through the GoToWebinar panel. We will be collecting those, and what we're hoping to have is a bit of a dynamic discussion as we go along through this webinar. When we're talking to Brian and Chris, I will be directing some questions to them that come from the audience and answering some as well that come to me. So we'll try to make this as interactive as possible. Now, I am excited to announce for the qualified IT professionals on the webinar today that we do have free access points to give to you. So those are 11N access points, similar to what you see on your screen, and we're going to throw in a 3-year cloud management license with it as well. So it's yours to keep and use as you please. Essentially, it's a great way to get your hands on Cisco Meraki technology and try out the dashboard for yourself, and all the features that we demoed today from the wireless side will of course be available to you. So to get you your free access point, we do need you to call and confirm your shipping information. Just check your emails, check your spam folders if you don't see any emails from us, but there should have been a reminder email about today's webinar, and in that email should be some contact information for your Cisco Meraki rep, and that's who you're going to call after this webinar to confirm your shipping information. So let's get started. Without further ado, a little bit of introduction about Cisco Meraki. So Meraki as a company was founded in 2006 by a research team from MIT. Now that team was working on a project called the RoofNet project. It was called the RoofNet project because the team was literally climbing on top of Cambridge, Massachusetts apartment building rooftops, affixing wireless access points to them, and then trying to figure out how to manage those from the internet. So we have in fact been cloud-based since day one. Now we've branched out beyond wireless access points since then. We have a full product lineup. We've got our MS lines, our MX line of security appliances, and a 100% free mobile device management solution called Systems Manager that supports iOS, Androids, Macs, and PCs. Now, Cisco did acquire us at the end of 2012, so we are the new cloud networking group. We're excited. We're continuing developing out all of our 4 product lines that I mentioned before. We've seen some spectacular growth, over 100% year-over-year annual growth, and we have been recognized by many of the IT industry's leading media and analysts for many of our products here. So we do have a bunch of clients that span many different verticals. We've got a few here listed for you from our K-12 segment, so not a comprehensive list, but just to sort of show a few of the folks who have invested in Cisco Meraki equipment. Now that said, we've clients in construction and manufacturing, hospitality, professional services, retail, higher ed, healthcare. So we really do span several different verticals, and we really do have a presence in organizations both small, medium, and large, but we do seem to have a very strong presence in K-12 specifically because of some of the features that we're going to talk about and demo for you today around things like high density, around things like BYOD, and providing seamless wireless. So that is a good leader into a question that we often get when we're introducing Cisco Meraki, which is, why would you want to even consider cloud networking? Now the answer to that revolves around the three buckets that you see on your screen here, the manageability, scalability, and cost saving. So the cloud fundamentally increases IT efficiency. It's three areas. So when we're talking about things like manageability, for example, what you're going to see with Cisco Meraki products, you have this incredibly deep, rich, end-to-end visibility from literally the perimeter of your network with our MX security appliances all the way down into the mobile client device through our mobile device management solution, literally from anywhere in the world that you have internet. So any internet accessible device, you can see all of your networks. It's very, very easy to drill down from an overview page into any single one of our pieces of our gear. Drill down into client devices to get a sense for applications being consumed, bandwidth being consumed, to set policies, firewall restrictions, et cetera, et cetera. So from the manageability side, you have that deep visibility and control. We also, because we are cloud-based, have support for true zero-touch configuration. Literally, you can pre-configure all of your Cisco Meraki before it has ever been plugged into power or plugged into the internet or plugged into your network, and you do that pre-configuration straight from the dashboard. So then when you do deploy out equipment to remote sites, it's incredibly easy. Someone without necessarily a lot of IT savvy can literally just plug the devices into power and plug them into an Ethernet jack, and you're up and running. The devices will grab configuration settings from the cloud and run with those. And then, of course, there are things like seamless updates. So you don't have to actually manually stage or install or keep up to date with any updates. We'll notify you when there's new features available for your equipment, and all you have to do is select a date, time, or opt out entirely of an update, and we'll push those updates if you've selected a date and time seamlessly from the cloud. So it does make sort of the overall management of lots of networking equipment significantly easier. In terms of scalability, this is where the cloud comes in. We are infinitely scalable. We can grow and shrink with your needs. You're not going to have the same limitations that you would have from traditional architectures. So things like the need to buy a wireless LAN controller, or even a redundant wireless LAN controller, or AP limits, or any of that sort of those sorts of bottlenecks. We've pushed all of that off into the cloud. So our gear sits on premise at your location, but you manage it all from the cloud. So we can grow and shrink very easily with your needs. And then in terms of cost savings, aside from getting sort of that redundant overlay hardware out of your networking closets, you'll find that our dashboard is super intuitive. It's very easy to navigate. You're not going to necessarily need to spend a lot of time or money training IT staff to get up and running with it. You're also not necessarily going to need to travel as much to remote sites, because you can manage those easily, again, from anywhere in the world that you have internet access. So again, just to sort of sum up, we have 4 product lines. All of them are designed to be 100% cloud managed, and you manage them through the graphical user interface, the dashboard that you log into from any internet accessible device just by opening up a browser, and we'll do that as part of our demo. So before we get started, I do want to just briefly talk about our cloud networking architecture. So again, the way it works is Meraki equipment will sit on premise, at your main office, at your main school district headquarters, at remote schools in different classrooms, wherever geographically your district may lie, and those devices will initiate a secure connection back to our cloud, so back to all of our data centers that are located all over the world. That connection is secure. It's encrypted twice, once with proprietary encryption and then again with a sort of standard SSL encryption. And what we're collecting there, that connection, is literally sending us the management and monitoring statistics that we need to present the information that you're going to see in the demo. So things like how many clients are passing traffic through your Meraki equipment, what kinds of devices are we looking at, what kinds of applications are they consuming, how much bandwidth are they consuming, all of those sorts of statistics. End user data is never passed through or stored in our cloud, and we call that out-of-band cloud management, specifically for that reason. We do get a lot of questions about our data centers, and what sort of security features we have in place there. So I just want to assure you they are incredibly reliable. There's a lot of high availability built right in. They're SAS 70 or SSAE 16 certified. They undergo daily penetration by McAfee. We ourselves are PCI level 1 compliant, and customers that have built HIPAA and PCI compliant networks using our gear. And we also have a very robust uptime service level agreement with our data center. So 99.99% uptime SLA. And in the event of a catastrophic failure, and let's just say, knock on wood, that a data center completely gets knocked offline, if that was a data center that was servicing your network and hosting your configuration, it would immediately fail over. We would immediately fail you over in real time to a secondary data center. So, we do nightly encrypted backups and all that good stuff too. So very, very secure. If you have any questions, I definitely encourage you to check out the URL at the bottom of your screen. It's meraki.cisco.com/trust. We do try to be as transparent as possible and put up as much information as we can about our privacy policy, sort of nitty-gritty details about our data center and things like that. All right, without further ado, this is the meat of our webinar right here. We're going to be speaking with Chris Smith and Brian Lawyer from Conestoga Valley School District. You guys, are you on the call right now? Let's see, you might have actually been muted. Let me go in and try to unmute you. You guys there?
Yeah, we're here. Can you hear us?
Ah, yes.
Oh.
Fantastic. All right. Let me, oops, we're getting ahead of ourselves here. So I was hoping you guys could just take a quick second, introduce yourselves and your roles with Conestoga Valley School District for the benefit of everyone on the call.
Sure. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Smith. I'm the Technology Services for our school district here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. This is my second year as our supervisor. I've been an assistant and a coach and a teacher in our district for the last 12 years in this role. Brian?
Hi, everybody. My name is Brian Lawyer. I'm the network and system tech here at the school. Been here for a little over a year, and basically one of my first big projects was putting this entire network into place that we're about to discuss.
You can see some of the information about our district there on the slide that we have available.
So I was wondering, while we're here and we're doing sort of background, could you guys give us a little bit of a sense for what the challenges were that you were facing in your old environment and why you were looking to do a hardware refresh to start with?
Yes. We had a hodgepodge of devices in all of our buildings. Our most connected building was our high school due to a state grant that we had received probably 7 or 8 ago. And we had access points in our hallways that really just weren't getting the coverage and density job done that we needed. As we added more equipment over the years, we had online state testing coming up. We just did not have the reliability that we needed in our high school to service the needs that were coming through. So we had to do something. We did have PoE switches in at the high school and voice over IP network that was running off of that, but it just really wasn't able to handle the wireless needs. So that's when we looked at bringing in a new wireless vendor or product, and we ended up choosing Meraki for a number of reasons we'll go over here probably today. And with that, we then looked to expand out to our other buildings and building in a PoE network into our elementaries and middle school. We didn't have anything really there. We just had some switches and labs and a few hotspots, access points here and there. Mm-hmm. So we made a concerted effort to really just push out a dense, reliable wireless network so that we could meet the demands for the next 5 to 8 years. And they certainly the saying of "if you build it, they will come" couldn't be more true in our scenario. As we added this equipment in, we've just seen so much use and addition into our curriculum instruction and assessment here in our district. Without a doubt.
Cool, that's good to hear. That's actually a good segue into this slide, but and before we get there, I always like to ask folks, when you were looking for new hardware, looking to refresh your wireless network, when you heard about Cisco Meraki, were there any caveats that you had in your head, anything that you were worried about or leery about?
Yeah, the big one was when it first came out, not knowing much about Meraki. I mean, it's a new name in the business. And then on top of the merger with Cisco happened right about the same time as we were looking to deploy it. So we were a little worried that, is this going to fall under the cloud of Meraki's going to disappear into Cisco and not be around for long. Mm-hmm. So we researched it, we talked with everybody, and we were comfortable going forward with it.
I'd say one of my big reservations too in the planning was, our old system of wireless that we had controllers and we had everything in-house. So moving to the cloud controller and giving up, what we thought was that control was a reservation going forward. I'd say one of the best pieces for me, one of my biggest reservations was we knew we had the issues of density and coverage with our previous, somewhat makeshift but also somewhat planned deployment of wireless. And it wasn't getting the job done. So before I went and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in time and energy, I wanted to make sure it worked. So Meraki was great in supporting that testing environment where we could try it to what I felt would be the demands of the next 3 to 5 years. So we were able to put that in place. So that was one of my reservations, is it going to hold up and actually meet those demands? And the testing certainly helped with that.
Yeah, and just for the benefit of folks on the call, if you don't know, we do have a free eval program, so all of our gear is available for free evaluation, and we actually pay for the shipping both ways. So it sounds like y'all made use of that, which is great. So
yes.
in terms of this slide, so I'm looking at this, and I'm seeing you deployed hundreds of access points, tens of switches, this across. You said you had a kind of a multi-site deployment here for elementary schools and whatnot, and you got all this out in 1 to 2 months. Could you tell us a little bit about your deployment experience? Were there any hiccups? Was anything surprisingly wonderful and easy to use?
Actually, the whole process was surprisingly wonderful. I mean, going from HP and 3Com switches to the Meraki switches, as far as the physical switches go, it was a matter of just dumping them into the rack, taking the old out. Once everything was in, I just go into the cloud interface, configure what needed to be configured. For example, the VLAN setup, being able to just go in and say, okay, there's 2 types of VLAN, voice and data. It's not like trying to figure out what was tagged and untagged. So it was real easy to configure the physical switches. Once the physical switches were in place, I mean, they're all PoE, just putting the access points in and going into the cloud and configure them. It saved so much time because I didn't have to console into each switch one at a time, each access point one at a time, and configure them. I could just get them out there, access them in the cloud. I could put up 10 or 15 access points, go into the cloud, and just configure all of them in one big shot instead of one at a time. That's what sped up the process and made it so nice and so convenient.
If you didn't make a key thing there, I'd say the thing that took the most time was actually running the networking wiring into the locations where we didn't have it before. It wasn't configuring or setting up any of the Meraki equipment. The most time-consuming was actually running cables to where we didn't have them. And in some of our buildings, that was the case. If it wasn't for that, it would have been weeks probably.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Okay, great. So we're going to dive a little bit into the nitty-gritty of your architecture. And I'm going to pause for a sec because apparently there is a question from the audience, which is how does Meraki integrate with other vendors? And the answer is we are standards-based, so you don't need to have a full stack of equipment to run Meraki hardware. You could just have access points, you could just have switches, you could just have a security appliance. But we do work side by side with other vendors. You might even have visibility into those devices a little bit, depending on how upstream your Meraki device is. But you're not going to be able to man, HP switches or Aruba wireless from our dashboard. So you would have at least more than one interface in which you would have to log in to networking gear and manage that? So it's a good question.
I will add in one additional comment on that. One of the nice things I found with the Meraki is all our GBICs that we had from HP and 3Com worked perfectly fine in the Merakis. We didn't have to go out and buy specialized GBICs all over the place.
Cool. Cool. So in speaking of switches, I was wondering if you could give us a little bit more depth about or insight into your architecture design, which switch models are you using, and how you came up with the number of switches to deploy per site.
Well, when we let's first add that you guys have added a lot more switches since we bought ours. Back when we bought ours, there was really only 2 or 3 models. We went with, first of all of them had to be PoE. That was one of our choices. And then we just went with the 24 or 48 port that made sense for where we needed it. So we went with the, I forget what model number, is it the 48? Yeah, the 48 port and the 24 port PoE switches. All the 48 ports have 10 gig GBICs, and all the 24s have 1 gig GBICs.
Okay.
We were in our old environment. We had a 1 gig backbone, and we didn't have PoEs everywhere. But we were able to consolidate many of our switches just by going through this process. I mean, we had 3Com, HP, Allied Tellison, and some Cisco, over probably 200 just in different locations. And just going through the process of easy deployment, we were able to consolidate that down to about 60. Also by adding wireless too, we did get rid of a lot of lab. We didn't have the need for the wired lab location, and that's a switch in itself probably in most locations. As far as the infrastructure, a lot of that was in place as far as where the racks were and the closets. That was already there. So we didn't have to redesign much of that. We just had to replace what was currently there. And that's based on, where our building renovation projects had fallen in the district over the last 10 to 15 years when we got that updated. We were fortunate enough to have single mode fiber run to every one of our closets already. We did that in a building renovation probably 8 years ago, and we haven't been using it, but it was already run in there, so that we didn't have to worry about that. So.
Right. And it sounds like from what I heard earlier, y'all are heavily using sort of the virtual stacking feature of our switch, which, again, for the benefit of folks who may not know, the switches use the cloud as a management control plane. So you can all the ports across all the switches in your network, regardless of model or geographic location, winnow down a list of ports, and then operate on them en masse. So turning them on, turning them off, setting VLANs, enabling or disabling PoE, spanning tree, those sorts of things. So, so I was wondering if you guys have used any of the troubleshooting, built-in troubleshooting and diagnostic functionality in the dashboard for the switches, cable tests.
Oh, absolutely. I use it a lot. I mean, just going to the main page where it shows all the devices and the green bar connectivity. I mean, as soon as you see a red bar, there's been a problem. So just being able to just look at that basic connectivity and see, oh, there was an outage at this time of day, and then you go into the switch and you can dig a little deeper. I've used some of the basics like pinging, bandwidth testing, like you have the ability to actually connect to a port through the interface, that port's connection out to the internet, so you can make sure that you're getting good connections out as well. So I've used that, and we also use a lot of the, what's the best word for it? We use a lot of the tools that let us look for devices, figure out what port they're connected to. Yeah, under the monitoring, we can go to the clients, look for a client, see where they're connected, what port they were connected to, when they were last connected, all that kind of stuff.
Okay. So we're getting a couple of questions from the audience for you guys. One of them was, and it's a sort of broad question, but what is your method for identifying high-density issues, and then how do you resolve them using Meraki?
Well,
standards.
that is kind of a broad, because of the way we have our network laid out. For example, at the high school, we have an access point in each classroom. So at any given time, we only have maybe 20 to 30 connected to it. So we haven't really hit like a high density situation
like
yet.
A peak. We haven't really hit a peak there. I mean, we do allow BYOD, which we might get into a little bit here a little bit later. So sometimes there's 40 or 50 that are on there. We set up different SSIDs for different devices as a way to help throttle what some of that bandwidth would be. So in our BYOD network, that's a different SSID, which I have throttled to just allow for a certain amount of bandwidth. And that helps to, you know, provide the resources for our devices and our one-to-one devices at our high school to get more of that bandwidth regardless of access point. And that's really easily configured just in the SSID and then tagging the APs with the SSID that's needed. So that's, I think, one way that we handle that. We really haven't peaked out, so I haven't had to worry about moving resources into like maybe the science wing when they're getting ready to do their state PSSA test. You know, in other areas, it just hasn't been that big of an issue.
Yeah, we've been fortunate with having enough access points.
And the 10 gig backbone.
Yeah.
Great. So 2 more questions for you guys. The first is, are you only using Meraki switches now? And the second one is...
We still have a couple of 3 common HP here or there, only because, to be honest, budget ran out. Yeah, I mean, we're looking next this summer to replace those remaining couple. But yeah, hoping by the end of the summer, will only be Meraki throughout all the buildings.
Our core switches, Cisco, Meraki didn't have a core solution for us, so we have a Cisco core.
Okay. And the second question was, are you having any wireless roaming issues?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
No.
Yeah, I was going to say no.
I mean, we have a few access points. We have a couple of other vendors that have access points that are required in here for like signage and scales that it'll pick up. But it's just, you know, in that scenario, we really just changing the channels to make sure that they're not interfering.
Right, yeah.
It took us a little bit to realize it, but once we were in the dashboard, we could find out that they were picking that up. So we really haven't had that issue. We're kind of a sprawling district, but
right.
We really haven't had any of that.
No, I mean, usually when we find that there's a different access point, we go out on it down and get rid of it.
So this slide, we're clearly talking about the BYOD, we're talking about one-to-one initiatives. I see you guys have installed Systems Manager on devices. Can you talk a little bit about that, what your experience there has been?
Yeah, I mean, we have, you know, hundreds and hundreds of iPads deployed right now, so we use that to manage them. That's a great free tool that we were actually using before we had any of the hardware, and that's been great just to deploy apps, software, even onto Windows machines. We have a couple other tools that we do that with, so we don't rely on that so much. But I love it just for the monitoring and complexity that I can see within the device and the network, as far as the apps, the software that's on it, where the device is that's come up. You know, as an administrator here, that happens quite often where this device goes missing, or we think Johnny might have taken this one, and the mobile device management is huge when it comes to that aspect of things. It doesn't take long to track it down.
Yeah, we also we have used it, not heavily, but the remote desktop feature as well. Yeah, I mean, you can VNC right into a client from the web interface, so we've been doing that here and there as well.
Okay, interesting. Interesting. And then we're building out, obviously every quarter we build out features for our product lines. And one of the latest ones that we did release was the basic geofencing capability. You know when a device has been removed from a geographic area. We're just going to keep building on top of that. So glad to hear you guys are taking use of some of the newer stuff there. So let's drill down a little bit into your wireless, because I bet a lot of folks here are interested in that. You said before you have separate SSIDs for different use cases. You're using authentication and whatnot. I know you guys are running a lot of Apple TVs. Can you just talk a little bit about the design of your wireless, why you have the SSIDs that you do, how you've integrated the Apple TVs, all that good stuff?
Yes. So we have basically an SSID for all of our district-owned devices that connect to a secure ID. We have it named, and we have a Radius server that helps to manage that connection for that SSID. We also have like a CV known guest, which is if we know who you are, you have an Active Directory account with us, and you want to bring in your own device, we have that as a guest account that they basically get a splash screen and a login for their Windows login, and therefore they would then connect to the guest network. We have a public network, which is for really anyone who comes outside into our district and needs access to just the internet. So they pretty much just go out the door with a basic web filter, and they're out to the internet. The other two give access to internal resources like our servers, file servers, printers, that kind of thing, where the public one is just strictly out the door to the public web. And the beautiful thing about that is we can just set that via tag to the only the access points that are in public areas. So, like you said there, cafeteria, the auditoriums and gym, it's not in like high school room 112, which is a math classroom, because then all the kids would want to be connecting to that one and going out and using up that bandwidth. And specifically for the Apple TVs, now Apple is, with their new update, has allowed us to certificate onto it, but before that, the Apple TV was just set up as like a personal at-home device and wouldn't connect to enterprise wireless systems at all. You had to use WPA or WEP to do that. And since we had a Radius server, it wasn't playing well. So we actually set up a hidden SSID that was WPA that the Apple TVs could connect to automatically. And it was great because we just deployed to the classrooms and the APs that were in that area with a simple tag, and we didn't have to go around and configure anything. It was just in the dashboard, one quick setting, 2 or 3 clicks, and it was everywhere. So that was very nice.
Yeah, the nice thing about the tagging, like the public, for example, if you have a classroom that, okay, we have a guest speaker coming in, that guest speaker needs internet access, well, guess what? We don't have to give them a user account. We don't have to do anything special. We just tag that access point with the public tag for that day. They get public access to the internet, and then we can take the tag off, and there's no public on that access point the next day.
And we know that Meraki has other solutions where you can set up like a day guest account and you can bring other people into the dashboard to help manage that. That's just not the solution we chose. We basically just put the SSID on and out they go, and it's just been easier for us that way.
Okay, good to hear. Before we get into the sort of monitoring reporting features, a couple more questions from the audience for you guys. Do you also have a mixed AP environment?
Not anymore, no. We are strictly Meraki now.
Yes, thank goodness. We did. Okay. We had Xeris, Aruba, and Meraki at one point, and this past summer I was able to make that go away.
Disappear, I see. Okay. And then the second question was, how did you determine how many Meraki devices you would need? So I'm guessing, what was the rationale behind 1 AP per classroom? That kind of
thing. That's a great. I'm going to dig back in the memory bank a little bit here, but I think one was the testing. We knew that we were looking to go 1-to-1 at our high school and what that density level was. And we looked at the Meraki APs and a couple other ones and what the recommended connections were. I mean, they're 600 megabyte per second APs. They figured anywhere about 30 devices could connect on that and put out 6 meg, or 60 devices could go there and give you 6 meg. So we basically went with the density and worked with the Meraki reps at that time and engineers to figure out what would be the best deployment for that density. Now we went every other room or every other room at the elementary because we just don't have as many devices. There's only carts in those hallways, so there might only be 30 or 60 devices that are moving from room to room. So we didn't need to have as much density because the sheer volume of devices weren't there.
Yeah, I mean, and from a point of view of, what we planned sometimes changed too. Once we got units out into the classrooms, we have buildings that are so old, I can't even think of how old they are.
50, 60 years old. They might have been prisons in their past life with all the rebar. And
yeah, so concrete. The signals don't travel well, so you might have 2 access points next to each other. And then in some other buildings, we might be able to go 3 or 4 classrooms with space and still get decent signal coverage. So with the elementaries, it was kind of more of a hit or miss based on where they were absolutely needed and how the signal strength was after we put them up.
We actually did a test. I mean, we used an app and went and put an access point on a tripod and went into the room and put it up and tested it to see what kind of density and coverage we were getting in those areas before we did it. So we did that the year before, actually, just to see what was covering.
Okay. Good, thank you. Appreciate that in-depth answer there. I'm just going to put a plug-in on the slide for the monitoring reporting functionality that we have built into the dashboard. If we have time, we'll demo that, but essentially built right into the dashboard. Again, available anytime that you log in. We have what's called summary reports, so it's a great way to go and see and identify network trends, so things like which Meraki equipment is being used the most, which applications are being consumed the most, which clients are consuming the most bandwidth. You can email those reports to yourself, select certain timelines or time slices to get that criteria, and of course it's always available in the cloud. So it's actually, you can interact with the report as well. You can click into top clients or top applications, for example, and we'll see that when we get to the demo. And I think this is actually the last slide before the demo. So I wonder if you guys had any comments here talking to the increase in network usage that you've seen and any sort of future plans that you have deploying the Cisco Meraki equipment.
Well, as I said earlier, if you build it, they will come. I mean, the amount of data that we move now is so much. I mean, we're doing terabytes, and it's amazing to see that use. You can drill down in Meraki to see what's being used the most, and on a day-to-day basis, most of it is file transfers through our file servers. You know, kids are accessing their digital portfolios and file servers that we have in place here. The next biggest one's probably YouTube. We do unblock for our high school. We don't block YouTube, so they're using that instructionally, as well as probably entertainment when you look at it, and that level changes. You know, what percentage of each one changes on any given day, but we're certainly using that for a good amount of data. And back to the reporting screen that you mentioned, I mean, that's where I go almost all the time, just see what's going on, and I actually have it set. You can schedule those reports. So I have the building principals at each building in there get that report every Monday, and it shows them the top, you know, access points, the top devices, the top sites of what was hit that last week. And they can drill into it if they want to. They love it. They just, you know, it's something they never really attuned to, but now it's just giving them a finger on the pulse of what's happening digitally in their building, which they've been really appreciative of. And it took me about 5 minutes to set up, and they love me. So I love that kind of technology.
Well, and it's good for troubleshooting. I mean, we just had an issue a few weeks ago where we could go in, look at all the devices that were connected to the high school wireless, and here we realized that students were using a user account that we didn't even know of to get on the, you know, the network.
Right.
So yeah, it's really good for troubleshooting and monitoring and seeing what's what.
Great, awesome.
I
So
was going to say what we're doing going forward. You know, when we first built it on that last said it's about 3 devices per user, and that's kind of what I've tried to plan ahead for. I figured at least 2. They're going to have a district machine and their own personal machine, but some of them might have a district machine, their personal iPad, and their mobile phone as well. So we tried to build it out for that. Where I see it moving, you know, we'll continue to expand our BYOD. Now that we have PoE, we have some other districts to bring into voice over IP, or some other buildings in the district to bring into voice over IP. Maybe plug in an access point here or there, some areas that we just don't have as strong a coverage, because I can say in our budget, you know, we're looking to add hundreds more devices next year at our elementary and middle school.
Right.
So I would see us getting closer to 1-to-1 in those grades over the next year and a half as well.
Cameras as well too.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I forgot about that one. Yeah, we don't have a unified camera over IP system yet. That's in the future plans too, and having, you know, PoE switches in the network big enough to support that kind of traffic. I believe we're in a place for now. We could never have those discussions before, but now we can.
okay, fantastic. So what I'm going to do, thank you guys both, really appreciate all the great presentations that you just gave, and all your answers to questions. I'm still going to plug you for questions though. What I'm going to do is switch over and log into the dashboard, and then while I'm logging in, I'm hoping you guys have a little bit more insight that you can share for some folks. One of the questions was, how do you keep students and staff from using the public SSID that you mentioned?
That's a good question. One is not everywhere, so we try to keep it out of the instructional areas or classrooms. Sometimes it is there. The the real issue is they can't get to what they need to do on a daily basis in that network. It just sends them out the door. So most of the time they need to access their file server. They need to access like our Moodle server or you know, a math server that we have here. So they can't hit any of those internal resources when they're on that network. So sometimes they don't realize they're on it, although there's a splash screen and an acceptance they have to go through. So they can't get to what they need to, and that's really the only way that we restrict it. Meraki actually has the ability to identify the device and then block them from that certain SSID. And we've kicked that around for our guest network for certain things because it causes some headaches, but I'm an advocate for not enabling too much. I want kids to understand what they're doing, where they're doing it, why they're doing it. So we try to, you know, push that back to them and say, hey, you need to make sure you're paying attention to what you're doing and what you're connected to. But there are ways to fix that.
Well, and the other thing to mention is even when the people are on public, they're still being filtered in-house by our web filter. So they're still held to our standards.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you. I just want to confirm this is y'all's dashboard. Yes.
Yep, that looks right. Yep.
All right. Excellent.
Well, she's on the main overview.
I'm on the overview. So so guys, on the call, for those of you who have never seen our interface, what I did was I opened up a web browser. I went to dashboard.meraki.com. I logged in with my username and credentials again because Chris and Brian have so graciously allowed us to demo their network. I'm able to find their network and log in. You can, if you want, disable Meraki from being able to view your network. There's a little checkbox that you can check in the dashboard. If you did select that, then if you needed tech support, you'd have to unselect it so we could see your dashboard and help you troubleshoot any problems. But just so you know, but what you're seeing here immediately, you're getting a sense for where in the world your devices and your networks live. You can click right down into any of these little tag icons or expand the view here, which is showing us all of the networks in the Conestoga Valley School District network. And you can see things like uptime, if devices or networks have had any downtime recently. You can do searches. You know, if I wanted to find, for example, wireless networks, I could do that and dive right in. Do you guys have any recommendation for a network?
Go to the high school.
Yeah, the high school wireless and the high school wired are probably our biggest, yeah.
All right, we'll look at these guys then. Oh yeah, so we're looking at high school wireless has nearly 2,000 clients in May, transferring looks like over 100 gigs of data. One of the things that we like to do is show the map and the floor plan view, and it looks like we might just have a little bit of trouble loading. Or have you guys placed these on the maps? Perhaps
Yeah,
not.
we did. If you
You got to change the floor plan to the
Yeah,
first. Yeah, there you go.
Got it. All right, there we go. So one of the cool features with our wireless, you know, you can upload floor plans and put your APs on a floor plan view so that you can very easily see if there's any issues with wireless connectivity in a particular area. You know, whether or not, for example, an access point might not be online. You can then go in and click into any AP from here, come to a configuration page, get some information about things like the current clients that are connecting. Looks like there's only one right now, and there it is. Things like channel utilization. There's a slew of tools here for you to use to troubleshoot the device. And because we are seeing that, you know, that there are actually switches as well, you know, you can see that you're connected to, this access point's connected to this port on this switch. You can click into this switch if you wanted to, come to its configuration page. So you're seeing a lot of live real-time status about these devices, who's connected, which ports are active, you know, if PoE is enabled on a port or not, that kind of thing. And there's always these tools available to you to do remote troubleshooting and diagnostics. And I'll also just say that we have a built-in packet capture utility that's pretty slick. You can stream to CloudShark, so you don't even need Wireshark installed on your device. You could run packet captures from an iPhone, for example. So lots of built-in tools and functionality there. But where it gets interesting is this clients page. So this is where you would go in, and right now, you know, we're looking at, let's just look at, for example, wireless network. You go into the clients page. So what we're going to see is basically here's all the client devices that have passed traffic, connected wirelessly and passed traffic through Chris and Brian's network for the last week, but we could look at different criteria here. So over 2,000 devices, almost 2,500. We can do things like search for iPads, see how many iPads out of that total number were connecting in the last week. Just grab manufacturer up here so you know I'm not lying. But you can do things too like search by operating system. You could even drill down actually into the version of the operating system if you wanted to make sure that there were no legacy OSs on your network. You can search by manufacturer. So this dynamic search, we call this client fingerprinting. It's built in, it's innate. You don't have to install anything on client devices to have this work for you as long as there's a device that's connected to Meraki equipment in some way and passing traffic through it. We can identify what it is. And so you can search by IP, by MAC, by the username, by the description of the device. So in a BYOD environment, if you want to really quickly get in and see, okay, well, how many iPads are connecting, or how many, do I have any Android phones? Do I even have any Android HTC phones? It's very nice to come in and get a quick and dirty estimate of what's connecting to your network.
Can I give a, oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
While you're talking about the clients, that's going to give a practical application. The one I use the most is user. A lot of times it's, oh, this person lost it, or I need to see where this person was or what happened, and I'll just search by username, and it'll tell me the last AP it connected to. If it has systems management on it, when I click on it, I can go right in and find where it is. So user is the most common for me administratively. Probably not Brian, but.
No, I've used the device feature. It's funny you said about we had file sharing going on, peer-to-peer file sharing. We tracked it down. There was 3 Android HTC devices. We were able to track down the model and where they were and who owned them. I mean, it was great.
Well, and you probably could come here and see, like I just did, here's the application wheel. So this is the applications that are consuming bandwidth on your network, again, for the last week, and, sort by usage, and boom, this, if this were peer-to-peer file sharing, or web, you can literally click into any single one of these applications, and what will happen is you'll see who the top consumers of that application are. So, if you had a peer-to-peer problem, well, here's the top 30 consumers of peer-to-peer, for example. And in this case, we're just looking at generic web. But you could click into any single one of these devices, and here's the client visibility. So you come in here and you say, okay, here's the name of this device. Oops. It's connected wirelessly right now in real time. Here's its signal strength. It's connected to this stat. I can run packet capture on it. I could look at its event log. I can change the time period that I'm looking at it from. But here's the bandwidth consumption and application consumption of this client. You can quickly come in and check, make sure it's got the right IP, make sure you can ping it, check and see if there's any firewall or group policy rules applied to it, et cetera, et cetera. And if this were a, let's say, an abuser of peer-to-peer or some other application, you could literally come in here and apply a policy to it. You can block the device, whitelist it, apply a group policy to it, or even apply a group policy based on which SSID it's connecting to. So I think the last thing from a time constraint perspective that I'll show is how you would actually go in and shape and control the traffic. So if you came in here and saw that peer-to-peer traffic was problematic for you, you wanted to create some policies, and this works for our security points. You could come in here. Let's say I'm going to create a new group policy. And we had a question from the audience at one point, which was, why would you use Radius or Active Directory authentication? And the answer is, if you are able to authenticate users and groups of users, you can push out firewall and traffic shaping policies to groups of users. So not just to devices or groups of devices, which is very, very easy to do within Dashboard, regardless of which authentication mechanism you have. But with some sort of user authentication, then you can apply policies to users. So here you would just name your policy. You can determine whether or not you want it to be applied at certain times. So certain days of the week, perhaps you want this policy in play. Other times, no. And where it gets fun is you can come down here because we have that visibility into applications. You can come here and you can outright block. I can say I am not going to allow peer-to-peer traffic for any user or device that gets this policy. Or maybe I can come in here and just say, well, it's just BitTorrent that's giving me problems. But if you don't want to outright block a category or an application, you can come here and add the applications individually. So maybe, maybe it's just Netflix and iTunes and Hulu that are giving me some grief. I want to let people get to them, but I actually want to throttle the bandwidth that they use. So it's very easy. You just choose a limit, throttle down to your chosen speed, and that means that Netflix, iTunes, and Hulu application use is going to be throttled immediately to 250 kilobits per second. If I wanted to prioritize these applications instead, you just ignore the limit and set that like this. And you can set SSID-wide policies, you can set site-wide policies with our MX security appliance, and then of course always set group policies for groups of users or groups of devices. And then all you do is you go in and apply the policies to users or groups or devices. You can actually automatically apply group policies by device type if you'd like. So you would pick your SSID and you would come in and, for example, let's just show you where you would do that. Again, from a BYOD perspective, you can come in here, pick the SSID that you want to talk about, and say, so let's just pick, maybe your guest SSID. You could come in here and you would say, I'm going to enable a particular group policy for all BlackBerries. Maybe I'm just going to block BlackBerries because it's not a corporate environment, and iPads are going to get, a different policy. So if we had them and listed here, we could select. And then you don't even have to worry about who's bringing what onto your network. You can also go select clients from that client page, like I showed you before. If you wanted to do it manually, you could, of course, come here and do something like, I'm going to search for all iPads, select them all, apply policy this way. Or again, if you're integrated with Radius and Active Directory, you can specify groups of users to apply the policy to. So we've got, we literally just scratched the surface. We've only looked at the wireless. We didn't even get to the switches, but we've got about 6 minutes. So I'm going to take a few more questions, and if anyone on the call wants to see anything else that's been to demo, just let Jackie know, and she'll let me know. Let me just pause for a second and mute myself and see what. Give me 1 second. We have a really interesting request that I haven't gotten in a while from someone who wants me to talk about the Make-A-Wish feature. So
I was actually going to mention that.
It's a great feature, right?
It is.
So on every page in our dashboard, we have this little Make-A-Wish button, and this is we take this very seriously. Actually, when you make a wish, your wish goes to our engineering team, our product management team, and they go to Sanjit, who's was our CEO, but is now the I think the vice president of our BU. And this is where you're going to say, I wish this page would do something. I wish we had a feature that did something.
How about I wish the switches showed up on the map?
Yeah, I wish the switches showed up on the map, and you would type it in here. We get a lot of really cool wishes for different things. And sometimes you'll see something fun. But yeah, you can make a wish, and this is what we use for product development. So, cute little feature there. Let me find out what other questions we've got. 1 sec. Question for you, Brian and Chris. Do you have any way of limiting the number of devices that a user can bring, or are you thinking of doing that?
At the moment, I'm not thinking about it. I mean, because until we have problems with bandwidth and density, I'm not concerned with it.
Mm-hmm.
Ditto. Yeah, that's kind of where I am too. I think where we run it most times is when they become discipline issues in the classroom and becomes a classroom management, then they look for us to come up with a technical solution to stop that kid from doing what they need to. And we can come in and block that device for a period of time if that's what's deemed necessary administratively. But from a overview network standpoint, no, we're not planning on doing any of that yet.
Yeah, we're trying to be receptive to technology, not blocking it, restricting it.
Yeah. Okay, great. There was a question from the audience that I can take, which was, how do you manage devices in areas that do not have internet connection? I'm not totally sure if the question is referring to mobile devices or Meraki equipment, so I'll answer both. If you lose internet connectivity with your Meraki equipment, which is a common question, your network will continue to operate with its last known configuration. And so if you're doing things like broadcasting SSIDs, or you have firewall rules or group policies in place, all of that will continue to work. If you're authenticating to local radius or Active Directory servers, you'll still be able to do that and do things like access file and print services. You won't be able to go online, of course, and edit any configuration settings for the gear. And so because sometimes people blow themselves up unintentionally through misconfiguration settings, if you are directly connected to or downstream of Meraki equipment, there are special URLs in the dashboard that you can go to access local configuration settings, and will let you set things like VLAN, IP, and whatnot, just to kind of get yourself out of trouble. Now, for mobile devices, of course, you would install a profile on a mobile device. You can apply settings to it. Of course, right now, let's just take iPhones or iPads as an example. A device could always, or a person could always remove the profile, at least as of right now. That's an Apple limitation. It's not something that we can control, but you would get a notification, for example, if they did that and if they were offline. You can also, of course, do things like specify HTTP proxies. So if you wanted to enforce SIPA-compliant content filtering, even though the device is not connected to a Meraki wireless network that you control, you can do that. Otherwise, we do have a couple of things like alerts for geofencing. If a device leaves a particular area, you can be notified, and you can do things like remotely erase or wipe devices. I think we've got time for maybe one more question for you guys, Chris and Brian. Let's see, there's a bunch up here. Have you identified peak use times, and are you using any scheduled policies, I guess?
To identify them, or to, I guess, taper them or support them?
Question doesn't say.
I'll just address both. Yeah. Yes, we've identified peak times. It's usually, we have what's called a flex period at the end of the day on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and that's usually around 2:40, or actually 2 o'clock to 2:40, and we see bandwidth spike at then. And over the lunch period, because they have a text, talk, and listen, they allow the kids to do it during their lunch, so I see things peak around that time as well. Again, it hasn't really hindered the instructional things happening during that time. No one's complained about slowness or lagging or connectivity, all the issues we used to have. So we haven't had to cap it, throttle it.
And I might add that occasionally you get the teacher that sends the email, why is the network slow? The first thing I do is go in and check all the graphs and charts, and I don't see any problems with the network. I email the teacher back, and they're like, well, let me restart my computer and see if it's just me. So it's harder for people to say there's a problem with the network now, because we do have that instant access to really see, is there really a problem, or is it just end user?
Okay. Well, guys, thank you so much. I so appreciate your time and everything that you said, and hopefully this has been really great for folks on the call and very useful. We do have to wrap it up because there is a webinar happening right, and I ran a little bit over time, but thank you. We hope to see everyone again at a future webinar, and Chris and Brian will be in touch shortly. Thank you.